We will get started. Now, you might notice that there's only two of us in the room. We do have another speaker joining us, very busy parent who is just finishing up at another appointment. So there will be a third person joining on the screen shortly. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third session in our primary school conversation series. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and the lands on which we're all joining from today. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. We acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters and community. For those that I haven't met, my name's Bree and I'm joining today from the lands of the Murrumbidgee people on Yuin Nation. I do encourage you to share which lands you're joining from in the chat. A few quick notes before we begin. Today's session will hopefully run for approximately 30 minutes. Please note that these sessions are being recorded and all registered participants will receive a link to the recording. To ensure a smooth experience for everyone, if you need any technical support, please use the chat function. For questions about the content, please use the Q&A box. We will try and answer these questions if time permits. Otherwise, we'll ensure the questions are addressed and provided with the video recording afterwards. As I've just mentioned, this session is being recorded for future viewing, so please be mindful of this when asking questions or engaging in the chat. And if you can refrain from taking any screenshots or making your own recordings without permission. So as I mentioned, this is our third session in our 4-part conversation series on supporting children with disability, developmental delay, autism in primary school. And this series is brought to you by Belongside Families. Some of you might have known us as Kindred. We have just gone through a name change, and that is in partnership with the Early Childhood Intervention Best Practice Network. Today's session focuses on building collaborative partnerships with your child's school. We're fortunate to be joined by two wonderful speakers. Pam will be joining shortly, but we have Zoe here. Zoe is the occupational therapy practice lead at Karana, and Zoe has extensive experience supporting children in school environments. And when Pam does pop in, Pam is a parent to Christopher, and she's going to share her journey in building effective partnerships with her son's care teams across medical, education, and therapy contests. Before we do get started, I want to acknowledge that everyone's journey is unique. We encourage you to take what resonates with your situation and discuss it with your child support network, including their educators, therapists, and medical professionals. The best outcomes often come from a collaborative approach where families work together with their child's team to adapt strategies to suit their specific circumstances. So Zoe, guess what? I'm going to go to you first. Bit hard to go to Pam. She hasn't popped in yet, but can you just help us understand what a truly effective family school partnership looks like in practice? You know, what are the hallmarks of good collaboration? Welcome, Pam.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess with all my answers today, I'm sort of coming at it from the therapy perspective, and I'm trying to sort of tailor my answers towards how you as families can help and how you can bring your therapist sort of on the same page as well. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing is strong communication between everybody. So for therapists working in schools, like we really want to make sure that our goals are as aligned to the school needs as possible. We want to make them link to the school goals, link them to any difficulties that the child is having at school. Yeah, that's sort of the biggest thing, and having that strong communication. So having teachers that are open and wanting to discuss progress in the session, therapists being able to share concerns from the family to the school, because I think sometimes it's hard for families to be able to, some school, like, there's minimal contact, or if sort of the children get school transport, you don't even get that pick up and drop off opportunity with families. So it can be helpful as the therapist to sort of sometimes like be the middleman and passing on those concerns. And I think flexibility is the other thing. So I think as a therapist, I understand quite well the busy routines of schools and teachers, to being flexible with what I am available for and how I can help. But then also hopefully the school is also willing to be flexible, based on our availability as well, because I know that's a really tricky balance we all have. And I think the other biggest thing was encouraging the schools to communicate back to families effectively. So I think I've got families that have always struggled with their school and being able to find out what happens in the day, or what, how did this happen, or what went wrong, or what was good. So I think that's sort of a bigger thing for schools to be mindful of. How much are they communicating back to families, and in what way works for them?
Amazing. Pam, thank you for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. You're a busy parent, and I think most of the parents watching can understand that. But I wanted to ask you about thinking about Christopher's journey. How did you begin building those initial relationships with his school team?
So basically, like open, honest communication, being super transparent. And I think we were really intentional with our communication around getting everyone on the same page and working towards the same goal, which was his overall comfort and quality of life. We're pretty lucky our son goes to a specialist school, so they're used to therapists hanging around, and we use our therapists as like support for the staff working with Christopher, so they can check in with them. We've got open communication between our therapy team and our school team, so if they can always check in and ask questions if needed. And I think, establishing from the very beginning that open and honest communication line and the common goal to work towards went a really long way to making sure that everyone was on the same page.
Yeah, I think I echo that in our experience as well. Just, that communication is so important, and that flexibility. And I think for me, particularly in the early days of my son's journey, was just my availability as well, just making sure that I was available. Which, I mean, I know not everyone has the luxury of that, but being there at the drop-offs and pickups, and if I needed to pop up during the day, just making sure I was available to support them, and then being able to bring in our team to support the school. But what approaches have you both found most effective for establishing open communication with school staff? I might go to you first, Zoe.
So I think as a therapist, needing to understand how schools operate and how much pressure teachers are under. I feel like sometimes we can feel pressure from teachers, we can feel pressure from families. So it's sort of trying to find that balance, I think. And I think when I'm in a school and in a session, I'm never telling a teacher what to do. I'm never saying this is what, the client needs, or this is what we have to do. It needs to be a discussion. So like, this is what I want, but practically, what can you do from, the gold standard? This is what we want. What can you make work? If it's like a sensory diet, ideally we'd love, every 30 minutes, every 45 minutes of some focused sensory activity. But realistically, I know that's not going to happen. So teachers are just not going to do it because it's too hard. Yeah. So just, I think going in there with a goal, a discussion, what is possible? How can we both how can we come to the table with the same goal? What can we both give? What can we both be flexible with? And I think another thing that is really important is offering to attend sort of IEP or PLP, whatever your school calls it, meetings with families. I know I've had many families that have, reported the benefits of this. A lot of families, when you're dealing with a child with a disability, it's overwhelming and it's hard to be in a meeting and take in all that information and remember it later. I think being there as a therapist, being the middleman, can be really helpful to add in some information for the family that I know of that they might have forgotten, or they might have been too overwhelmed to say. Also then being able to explain the school routine and what I see in the school in my sessions, being able to relay that back to the family. So just helping the teachers to get their point across, helping the family to get their point across, and just, being in the middle, I think is really helpful.
And I imagine for you, Zoe, too, like every school is going to have a different approach to how they work with therapists, how they work with families. So I suppose when you come into those settings, you've got to spend a little bit of time understanding how that works in each setting, don't you?
Yeah, and how much input do they want us to have? Are we invited? Are we allowed in the meetings? Are we not allowed? Are we requested by the school to go in?
Yeah, there's definitely not a one size fits all within the education system, is there?
And some families, don't need that support, which is fine. Like, it's just to know that that is something that therapists can do. Like often I'll have families say, oh, I've got this meeting. Are you able to come? Like, I don't know if you're allowed. I don't know if this works, but it's like, of course we can. Like, you know, we try to make it work where we can. But yeah, I think we're a support system for the family in that way. And yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Pam, did you have anything to add on that?
Just in terms of like, I find that particularly because Christopher uses a lot of specialist equipment. So having our therapists check in with our school team every term ensures that everyone who's working with him and using the equipment such as like splints and arm wraps and AFOs and standing frames, they're using them correctly. And yeah, it's when a therapist goes into the classroom, our therapist can like show all 6 support staff at the same time, whereas I'm transferring that information at drop off to one person. And it means that there's no Chinese whispers and it's not getting scrambled along the way. And his elbow splints don't go on the wrong arms or upside down because someone has been there to show them exactly how they use. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And so I might stick with you now, Pam, but you know, can you share a specific example of when collaboration actually made a real difference for Christopher?
So Christopher's started using an eye gaze for communication, and we've just recently uploaded the full pod software onto his eye gaze. And that was a collaborative effort between his speechy and his educators at school. We had been using a different program that was very much based on what his interests were and relying on us putting the visuals into the eye gaze. And the most commonly used button by term 3 last year was not on my device, which meant that his teacher would then go and get the physical pod book and then use process of elimination to work out what he was trying to say with a physical book. So we uploaded the software onto his eye gaze, and he's now starting to get quite proficient in the use of the pod at school. He doesn't use it at home for me, but he's doing it really well at school. So that was a beautiful collaborative effort between his speechy supporting both the school therapists and the support staff within his classroom to facilitate the education of the staff and facilitate his ability to communicate with those around him. Yeah.
I have to say our boys are so similar. My son does so much more at school than he'll do for me at home, even when it comes to toilet timing and everything at school.
Yeah.
Great. At home,
Mum knows what I want without me trying to say it.
Exactly.
We've got a bit of a challenge at school this year because he's got a new teacher and she's not his favorite. And so he's like, when she tries to make him do work, he just goes to sleep or pretends to be asleep.
He's too smart.
But if they go and get his old teacher, who's now the exec for his classroom, he is like producing sentences and doing all kinds of wonderful things because he knows her so well. Anyway, he's so cheeky.
I love it. And I guess, Zoe, from your professional experience, like there are some common barriers to effective partnerships. What are some of those barriers and how can families navigate them?
Yeah, look, I think barriers are getting harder and harder every year. But, you know, we're always trying to push through and see how we can make the process a bit easier. I think one of the ones that's coming up more and more for us as an organisation working in schools is schools not wanting to talk to therapists to start with. I think that's been a really tricky thing when I can think of a couple of really complex clients who have a lot of high support needs, and parents are understandably in this state of burnout and are overwhelmed. And, we just want to get into school so we can help the child. We can, start working on therapy goals. We can start to, even support the school to realize what's happening at home. But the school is saying, no, we need a meeting with the family first. We need the family to sign the paperwork. And then the family has to fill out all the therapist details and goals, and then we'll get in contact. So, we're in now, I don't even know what week of term we're in, but we're nearly finished term 1. We're still not in
week 6 or something.
Yeah. So I think that's trickier, trying to navigate that. And it's families that you know, again, understandably are having this like significant burnout and don't have the capacity to do this, that's a real challenge that we can't get in. We can't help the family, we can't help the school until we get all the paperwork. So I think that's a really tricky thing at the moment. And I guess the way that we're trying to go around this is, if we've got the contact with the family, filling out that paperwork for them and sending it back. You know, like we don't expect families to know sort of all our details. We don't expect them to know our, I think one school the other day wanted to know, like, I'm working with children check and all these other things. I was like, we can do that for you. Like, you know, if you just let us know, we'll fill out that paperwork, we'll send it back to you, and then you give it to the school, because, you know, we can't directly send that to the school. That would be crazy. So yeah, I think that's a tricky thing at the moment. So yeah, therapists to support the families to contact the school first, or to support filling out the paperwork and the goals. And I said it before as well, but like just trying to make sure that the goals of therapy align as much as possible with the needs at school. You know, I know of schools that before have, you know, been a bit put off by, this is probably earlier career, I guess, for me. But, you know, I'd go in there with a goal that the family wants to work on that is just not appropriate for school, or it's not achievable at school. So the schools are, you know, we're taking away valuable sort of learning and education time. So I think it's having that conversation with the therapist and the family to make sure that the goals are relevant and do align to the school. Otherwise, it's just not practical for the school, and then it puts them offside straight away. And the last thing is just being honest with the school from families. You know, I think when families are having a tough time at home and they're not sharing that information with the school, you know, we can see the flow and effects of the child's behaviour at school, that suddenly, you know, they're not communicating how they used to, or, you know, they're just a bit more withdrawn, or, you know, showing other behaviours of concern. But if families feel safe enough to communicate that with the school, then everybody can work together. Everyone's on the same page. The school can help, but they can't help unless they know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can speak to that paperwork side of things. We've had the same therapist going into school for the last 5 years, but every year they need to fill out the form again.
Different paperwork, new versions.
Yeah, new versions. I'm like, oh, can we just copy it from last year? But no, we need new stuff. They need to cite everything again. And I understand there's those checks and balances for a reason. But yeah, when you've only got an hour and you've got a therapist there, in the first 15 minutes he's filling out paperwork, it can get a bit frustrating. Very much so. So obviously challenges do arise. And I might go to you, Pam. When these challenges arise, how do you maintain these relationships over time?
I think it comes down to open, honest communication. You get really creative with having difficult conversations the further along your journey you get. But I think ultimately, if you've got everyone on the same page working towards the same goal, which for us is always Christopher's comfort and his quality of life. He goes to a specialist school. He's not the Ducks by any means. He's not there for academic purposes. He's literally there to socialize and have a good time. And he might learn some stuff along the way, but that's all just bonus. We need him to be happy and comfortable and supported. And if that means that we need to have our therapist visit the school more frequently than once a term, so that all of the support staff are educated in how to use his supportive equipment, specialized equipment, then that's what we'll do. But yeah, I think it's like ultimately comes down to working towards that common goal. We're working with his new teacher to kind of navigate his unparticipation in class, his lack of participation at this current time. And I pretty much just said to her, like, you need to just work on your rapport with him. Forget classwork. Like, don't try and push any of that. Just try and build a relationship with him and get him on side. So yeah. And yeah, it's just open, honest communication. Like, there's nothing she can do about the fact that he doesn't trust her because she's new, other than work on her relationship with him. And new therapists are the same, but, you know, getting everyone on the same page, working towards that common goal, I think is the quickest and easiest way to do that.
And I think what you've just said there as well is knowing what your priority for school for Christopher is. So I think when you're having some of those challenges arise, like obviously you know, for you, it's that social and emotional well-being. For
Yeah.
others, it might be their academic growth, but, you know, is your main priority, is that being met? And that's what we focus on first, and the other stuff kind of flows afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to have that, to know. I think for me as well, I just always, when challenges arise, I think about, particularly if the school's asking something of us, I try and think about the intention behind what they're asking or what they're suggesting. And it's usually good. It just might not align with our priorities and our values. So I think if we can come in with that kind of respect, understanding, and have those reasonable conversations around how to move forward and collaborate on what we do to move forward. Because there sometimes are requests that don't align with what we want for Dax's education. But because I know that and I know what's important to us, I'm able to have those harder conversations. But the intention from the school usually always comes from a good place.
Yeah.
Okay. What
Yeah,
about you, Zoe? What do you say when these challenges arise? Like, how do we maintain these relationships over time?
I think it's just echoing what you've both said. Like, really, it's the open communication, working together. I think, again, knowing, like, the school knowing that, like, as a therapist, I'm there to help them as well. Because I don't also, you know, I know schools might sometimes feel like, oh, we're going in there, we're telling them what to do, or we're telling them that the family isn't happy with this or that. So it's just, I'm here to help the child. I'm here to help you to help the child. Like, you know, that's our common goal, I guess. And again, just using the therapist where possible, or if needed, as like the middleman, like bridging that gap between home and school. And yeah, hearing from them, what are their challenges, and then we can take that back to the family, have a talk about that. But yeah, it's just that open communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that was kind of my next question around balancing advocating strongly for a child's needs while maintaining that positive working relationship. Anyone got any additional tips on that? I feel like we've covered it a little bit there, but anything else you wanted to add to that point?
I think it's important to have regular meetings with everybody on the child's team. So having the family there, having the school there, having your therapy team there, just giving everyone a chance to be heard, and just to, I guess, be able to see that we are all there for the same reason. I think the other thing I was thinking of was not being afraid to request an executive in those meetings if you need to. I feel like I've had lots of families that are just, you know, feeling unheard by the teacher, or not feeling like, you know, their child's needs are being met. And, you know, obviously you don't go straight to the principal, you know, first thing, but then I think once it's becoming a pattern, or if it's really causing you anxiety, it's really causing you distress, it's okay to ask for more support from the school. Like, I know I had one family last year that the child kept coming home, and he was being, you know, hurt by a new student in the school. And it wasn't until the family sort of had enough and said, no, I need to talk to the principal. Principal got involved, and then things changed. And now my child, like my client, is now happy to be back at school. So I think, yeah, just don't be afraid to lean on to executives if it gets to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you wanted to add there, Pam?
No, I think that just about covers everything. Yeah, just don't be, like Zoe said, don't be afraid to like ask to speak to the manager. Like, it's okay to be a parent. Your kids, like, comfort and safety comes first. And if they're not thriving at school the way that you think they deserve to be, it's okay to ask for more people to step in and like achieve that goal. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
probably document that meeting as well.
Yeah.
I have some families that are really on top of that documentation, and other families that are, like I said before, might just get overwhelmed and, you know, shut down a little bit as their own sort of coping mechanism. But yeah, just having things in writing, following up with the teachers in writing if, you know, there is a challenge or something going on, so you know that you've done everything you possibly can, and you've got it in writing that the school has said they would do this, or, you know, that they would try this. So that's another helpful tip.
And I think it's really nice to have those conversations with the school when you're first starting. Like, what is the process if something happens and I don't feel like my child's needs are getting met. And they do have a process. Like you go to your school teacher, then it might be the year advisor for that group, and then it might be the executive team. And beyond that, there are other supports. Like each school does in New South Wales has a learning and wellbeing officer for their school's area. So you can go to them as well, and they can help you navigate some of those trickier conversations, and they can put more supports in place for the school. They can possibly supply some, extra education for the schools around some of the challenges. So I think just understanding that process and having the conversation with the school from the beginning around, okay, if something's not working, what can we do? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next webinar in a couple of weeks around what to do if it's not working. But Pam, I just want to know, like, does Christopher actually play a role in these partnerships? Like, how obviously he's non-speaking, which you've alluded to earlier,
Yeah,
but how do you
he's non-verbal,
how do you
but
ensure that his voice is included?
he's non-verbal, but he has strong opinions.
We know about his new teacher.
Oh yeah, we know he's not a fan. Yeah, like he will just like pretend to be asleep. He's so cheeky. I think like we know, like if he's had a particularly rough day, like so his class size has changed this year as well. There's more kids, and a couple of the students in his class are very loud. So they're non-verbal, but they vocalize a lot. And so there's actually not a quiet space in his classroom this year, which he's always had previously. So we've noticed that he's incredibly overstimulated and tired when he's getting home from school this year. So we're working with his teacher and his support staff at school to try and kind of mitigate and maybe work some quiet time into his day in the hope that that will improve his relationship with his new teacher and help him kind of participate a bit more actively in his classwork. But yeah, it's just like that, reading him, and not we know him so well that I can tell straight away whether he's had a good day or a bad day at school, both health wise and like school wise. So yeah, he's, like I said, non-verbal, but has strong opinions. And if it's a one-off day, we kind of leave it. But if it's happening consistently throughout the week, then we might just check in and go, hey, what's been happening? Has there been someone who's particularly unsettled in the class this week because he's like really disgruntled, or like have we been trying to make him work too hard? Like what's going on with him? Yeah, and so you're not allowed to say work. If you say work, he will just like flat out ignore you. So yeah, but like that's the communication and the relationship that we've built up with the staff in the school over time, and like they know him quite well now. So yeah, like I said, non-verbal but strong opinions.
Yeah. And I think like what you just said then too about over time, like these relationships, it's not just a set and forget. Like any relationship, they take work. It's
Yeah.
that constant check-in, it's that constant collaboration. There are new people joining and leaving your team constantly, whether it's new teachers, new support staff, therapists. So yeah,
and like you said earlier, Bree, I'm also fortunate enough to be there for pick up and drop off every day. So I've got that point of contact with the staff in his room, whether it's his teacher or one of the support staff, to debrief about his day and find out like what kind of day he's had. And I think it can be more difficult if you're not there, like if your child catches the bus or whatever, it can be harder. But email has always been a great form of communication if I haven't been able to see the person I've needed to see at pick up or drop off. And like I said before, our therapists are all open to communicating with school as well. So they have that point of contact too.
Yeah, it's a lot of work and takes a lot of intention.
Oh yeah, it's very intentional. Very
intentional.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to parents who might be feeling intimidated about approaching their child's school team? I'll go to both of you, so whoever wants to jump in.
Like you are your child's voice more often than not. You're going to be able to advocate advocate for them in a way that no one else can, especially when our kids are vulnerable and can't do it for themselves. So it's exhausting and it's hard work, and it does require a lot of intention and energy, but ultimately it's what's best for our kids. And that's all we want. That's all we're working towards. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, that requires way more intention and effort than other families. But ultimately, we just want what's best for our kid. And if that means that we have to make some noise and move up the ladder and ask these really hard questions, then that's what we need to do. Yeah, I think if you just keep in mind their care, their comfort, and like meeting their basic needs, it becomes a bit easier. Yeah.
Chloe?
I think things I've already said before, but really you can like lean on your therapist for support if you need to. We're there to help you and your child through this. Especially like we've probably more often than not been in the school before for other clients. We might already have those connections and relationships with the school that we can help sort of facilitate those initial conversations. And I think just being open with the school about your needs and your child's needs, it's hard for schools to help if they don't know what's going on. So if you go in there, really wanting to be on the same page and really wanting to work with them, then that sets sort of a good foundation, I think.
Absolutely. And I think for those families that are getting a bit of resistance about therapists coming into school, my tip is approach it as if that the therapist is there to support the school.
Yep.
So I think a lot of schools get their back up thinking, oh, that you're just going to come in, take the child out of the class and go to a therapy session. But I think when we rephrase it, that they're here to observe and give some tips and strategies to the people that are supporting our children, it definitely be received a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
exactly. Like we're here to help them as well. We're not here.
Yeah, they're here to help
you.
Harder.
Yeah,
absolutely. Last question, because we are over, but what is the one key ingredient to successful collaboration that you've discovered through your experience?
I guess for me as a therapist, it's not going in there and trying to be, the expert. I don't want to go in there and tell a teacher how to do their job and how to do it and when to do it. Needing to meet in the middle. So hearing the teacher, hearing the school's approach to therapy, because like we said, they're all so different. And just being able to recognize the teacher's workload, being creative in how I can insert myself into their normal routines to meet the child's goals and needs. Because like you just said, we don't like going into a school and withdrawing for 45 minutes is not ideal. There's no capacity building there. We don't want to do it. We don't like to do it. Some schools, that's the policy and it is what it is. But yeah, trying to stay in that natural environment and accommodate and, give suggestions to the real life routine, I think makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, I agree. Pam, what's that?
Communication. I think if you're open, honest, and transparent with everybody involved, it's easier to get everyone on side to a common goal. And framing it, like you said, framing it as like everyone supporting everyone else.
Yeah.
Because schools are the expert in education, therapists are the experts in therapies, and we're the experts in our kids. So we all need to work together to get the best outcome for our kid.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you.
Love your insights and sharing your experiences. We know that practical advice and personal stories can help illustrate how collaborative partnerships can truly enhance a child's educational experience and support their development. Thank you to everyone that's watched live, and thank you to everyone that's going to watch the replay. Looking ahead, this, as I said, is our third session in our 4-part series. So our final session is what to do if it's not working. And that will be held on Wednesday, the 2nd of April. So if you have registered, you will receive a reminder email with the connection details closer to the date. I'm going to share the link in the chat for those that might want to register for that. I just wanted to let everyone know we're also about to launch a new workshop. on working together with schools, and we are going to be running a day and an evening session in early April. So I do encourage you to head to our website, to our events page, and have a look at those. There's also some for a new workshop for working together with your early childcare centre as well, if that's of interest to anyone. So yes, definitely head to the events page. Again, I mean, these discussions are great. I think they really highlight how building strong collaborative partnerships with schools can create the foundation of support that helps our children thrive in their educational setting. And as you've both said, effective partnerships built on mutual respect, clear communication, and shared commitment to supporting your child's needs is what's going to work. So thank you so much again. We look forward to seeing everybody else at our next session, or perhaps in one of those workshops. And happy Wednesday. I hope everyone has a great week. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Bree.
And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.